Hi, welcome everyone. You're here with Cassidy, Jackie, and Hannah from Kindness Across Abilities, a nonprofit organization geared to support and advocate in alignment with the autism community. Thanks for coming. We're so happy you're here with us.
Absolutely. We are, as they say, what is it? A day late and a dollar short. We maybe have missed September, but we still feel like the topic is extremely important, and we want to touch on autism and its relation and risk factor of suicide attempts, suicide idealization, and things like that. So here we are.
Absolutely.
Yes. And Cassidy and Jackie have done all the lovely work of all the research for me this time. So I'm going to kind of be the one, I guess, questioning them at different moments and sort of guiding it. But I think Jackie introduced it pretty well. So if you guys want to talk about what you found.
Whoops. Yep, I'm almost ready to explain myself.
Yeah. I was going to say, Cassidy, we'll start with you. What was something you found really interesting about your research or found really impactful about your research?
Yes, so you can see me, right?
Yes.
Okay, the technical difficulties. My goodness, here we go. So, okay, one of the research articles that I read was about emotional regulation and its factoring into individuals with autism experiencing suicidal ideas and behaviors. And I loved this article because it broke it down for me. When I think of emotional regulation, I always thought of people just that reactivity side to emotional regulation, which, if you could imagine, could have a, indication or lead somebody to potentially do something as like serious as taking their own life because they react and they, don't think of what could come after a decision. The second part of emotional regulation, though, is dysphoria. I think I'm saying that right. So that's when an individual struggles to, they might be feeling a lot of thoughts of guilt and feeling like it's hard to get moving, lack of motivation, but also hard for them to come back up from a lot of negative thoughts and to get back onto that higher vibration, that higher like positivity. So once I thought of, I figured that out, it made the research article that much more informative and interesting. So overall, the way this article has, determined the influence of emotional regulation. It says that it is, what was the exact words? What was it, like significantly correlated? Something to that effect, very correlated. However, they couldn't say that, levels of, because they scored it based on an index. So like your emotional dysregulation index number, based on those two categories, would either make you more susceptible to suicidal thoughts and tendencies and or less. And while it was significantly correlated, they couldn't say it was directly influenced because there was just a multitude of other factors. I mean, you talk about like, social economic status, but also things like anxiety, depression. Let's see, just looking here over my notes again. Like autism has its own characteristics, like impaired, potentially poor problem solving abilities or difficulties asking for help and lack of external support. So when you think of all of these other influences and variables, it's definitely still correlated. But another thing that was very interesting was that individuals that were vocal were compared with individuals that were non-vocal, and across the board, both had a very significant correlation. So even if they were able to communicate a little bit more fluently and readily, things like the lack of external support and potential, like, other potential factors were playing into effect. Yeah, it was It was very interesting. One other thing I want to point out was, and I'll get more into the numbers in just a second, but the parent report is typically how they were able to gauge the way these individuals were either feeling suicidal thoughts or actually just like displaying the behaviors. And the research article did say that parent report was significantly less than the actual amount. So I thought that was definitely something to circle back to.
Yeah. Yeah, that is interesting. It's
So,
almost like they're portraying it or not portraying it, like hiding it. Maybe they're afraid to show it. But I think that's also so important to be like, it's so correlated, but all of these other things could influence it because those are all risk factors that are potentially like playing into this. And that's kind of where my articles came from, is a risk factor. One of them was just like a meta-analysis of a bunch of different articles. And they were saying, is there a correlation between autism and like a risk of suicide? And like across the board, I think they looked at like over 40 studies. Like if you have autism, you just have a higher risk across the board on like every study they looked at. It's there. Like we know pretty much, as looking at the research, we know that that's a fact. Like if you have autism, you're going to have a higher risk of having suicide attempts or having suicide ideas. And then so the other article was kind of looking at, well, why? Like what about autism? And like Cassidy said, it's the risk factors are almost like the comorbidities of autism. Like autism itself already, like you struggle with communication, you struggle with social interaction, you're feeling isolated. It's already there. You're already starting at like a higher risk factor. And then to add anxiety or depression and antidepressant medication on top of it. There's another condition called alexithymia, and it makes it hard to like express the emotion, but also doesn't make the feeling. The description was better. Let me read it. It impairs both the experience, that was the word I was looking for, and the expression of emotion. So having all of those come into play. But what I thought was really interesting is when it broke down the numbers of being higher, like I said, across the board, but also females are like 3 times more likely than a typical female. And we know that there's more males in the field. So there is a higher, if you're looking at male to female, males have a higher risk factor. But we also know that there's more males diagnosed with autism. So when you're looking at female for like diagnosed with ASD and a neurotypical female, the female with ASD is like 3 times more likely to do a suicide attempt than, and that's of the population of a neurotypical female, in already saying like, this is her risk factor. Like this is the amount who would do it in that comparison. And it talks about age ranges, which is like concerning. In one study of 26, 2 individuals actually took their life. The number, when it's compared to the general population, is astronomically higher. The general population is at like 4%, and a person with ASD is at like 35%, I think it said. So that number is just startling. It's not a gap. It's not like, oh, it's a little bit higher. Like, let's teach, emotional regulation. Let's teach these skills. It's extremely higher.
yes, that was indicative in my article as well, because they used 3 different groups of people. They used like a United States like government census, where they were able to pull information from children in a similar age group to another community of autism, like online census that they had, and they got information from them, and then they also got information from an inpatient facility for individuals with autism. And so like the general US Census had about 1,000 people. The ASD community was another 1,000, a little bit over, and then the inpatient was only 330 people. But when they took percentages, about 4.8 people of the general US Census said that they had suicidal thoughts, where about 14% of the community of autism or autistic people online said about 14%, where it was 25% of the individuals as inpatients, which is just crazy when you put that with the context of such a smaller group of people as well, like a third. So there's just so much that more support, more just research that we all need to do that to really resolve this issue, because it is consistent across all research that they're experiencing so much more of that.
Yeah. Something I heard in both of y'all's articles that I really appreciated is I do think having worked with people with autism for a while now, I think that is something that a lot of people have a misconception about, is that like there is also like, you know, an internal, like, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? That there are also like emotional and internal impacts of autism that are not related to anybody else other than the individual and how it impacts them
Mm-hmm.
and how difficult those things can be, even if not things that impact other people for them as themselves. And I don't think there's a lot of acknowledgement of that side of autism. So I think that probably even feeds into some of that too, is that we really only focus on the behaviors we see from an outside perspective and not some of those internal behaviors that may be affecting that individual.
Right. Because how does one begin to measure awareness? Even if it isn't, a form like having a functional form of communication or whatever the external variables, as you're saying, is. Because one thing we can all agree with autism is that is a group, like that is a identity. So if that group is feeling like the rest of the population does not support or understand, I mean, that's enough of a reason alone to have suicidal thoughts, at least.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're talking about like it as a staircase, right? And like the top is where it's like attempts or idealization is going to come into play. Like there's so many aspects that they're just moving up the tier. Like you said, the internal, the external, the like complications of emotional regulation and emotional identification, comorbidities of depression, antidepressants. Like, I mean, it just keeps piling on top of them that I do see how it would be hard to attack as a population. One, they're all so unique, but two, there's all so many different aspects that are influencing it. It's not like okay, well, COVID made everyone stay home. Everyone felt isolated. Like there was a distinct thing that was going across. Like this is so individualized and there's so many different aspects that it would be hard. You'd almost have to teach like a blanket strategy to like help each tier. It would be difficult.
Yeah.
So ideas, blanket strategies. How would we prevent, or what would be something that would help bring down the risk for our autistic individuals?
I think we kind of already started to participate in some of those things, like, for example, Swanee. That was, again, such a beautiful, unique opportunity in the community. And I think something really cool about that was that it didn't matter if you had a diagnosis or not. We shared a human experience that day.
Yeah.
And I think when you bring somebody else in at their comfort level and you show them how it helps them or how their sensory system affects them, then you have more to relate to when you talk to somebody who struggles with those things, if that makes sense, and more awareness.
Very, very true. Yeah, we were able to do that day where we could all relate to that one. We've all been sensory like overloaded. We all can experience that. And I feel like you can, maybe find that common ground, but I also feel like too, like that communication, because especially within the home, like, and I know that's a tough situation, and I would never tell somebody how to be a parent or a sister or a sibling, anything, but just with the reports being so much lower than they actually were, just to avoid as much risk as we possibly can. I don't know. That's a tough topic, though. Do you guys have any input on how to start that conversation? Because a lot of times, especially if they are able to communicate vocally, you'd be like, "Hey, how was your day?" It was fine. You know, how do you really begin?
Yeah. I think being literal is helpful too with our group. So instead of being like, how was your day? Be like, tell me 3 good things about your day. Tell me 3 things that you didn't enjoy. And maybe the didn't enjoy is like math, you know, like, but maybe it's something they enjoy. Like, it doesn't have to be like a positive emotional thing. It could just be, but at least you have a better idea of what's going on throughout the day. And I think there is so much like, almost like negative pressures of suicide, like to someone, like especially a child, to say like, hey, I've been really depressed lately, I don't feel good about myself, I've been thinking, you know, these thoughts. I feel like a child would, even if they were a little bit older, would feel like they couldn't say those things.
Yeah.
Right, like, I'm going to be in trouble, or I'm not free to express these feelings, or they won't be taken well, or things like that. I think that we need to, be more vocal about, I don't know, the sadness of life. Be real with them. Like, just because you say these things and you feel this way doesn't mean you have to do it or you're going to do it. You know, it just, let's talk about it, and then let's work our way to you feeling better.
Absolutely. Even for my own girls, like, I'm a single mom, so that comes with a lot of strains. And I cry more than I ever have. And my oldest daughter was like, "Why are you always crying?" And it's like, I am sad, and I'm sad more often some months than other months. But you're absolutely right. Getting that out in the open, not just saying, "Yeah, I'm good." Like, if somebody asks you, "How was your day?" being a little bit more honest.
Like at the doctor's office is where I noticed this. Like, if you're at the doctor, you're potentially there for, especially as an adult. Like, as a kid, obviously there's like well checks, but like going in as an adult, like these are like 80-year-old like men, or like obviously broken arm. Like, there's just something. Everyone's there for a reason, right? But yet every time they called back, the nurse was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And everyone's like, "I'm doing great, thanks for asking," or "I'm doing good." And I'm like, I'm not doing good, so could someone help me?
Yeah, can I go first?
Yeah, he says he's fine, so maybe I could get called back now. Yeah, it's like so habitual that we don't even think about it. We're like, yeah, my life is crumbling to pieces. I'm happy. I always think of the Ross thing. I'm fine.
That is so funny. I do think too, with the communication factor, I think whether it's vocal or not, I mean, even as somebody who has struggled with mental health themselves growing up and things like that, like, it's not all like you said, just because your child is verbal doesn't mean that they're going to come up to you and be like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing, some crazy stuff," or whatever. But I think that nonverbal communication sometimes says it all. Like, maybe they say they're fine, but then instead of playing outside or running to their TV show, they're laying in their room, they're being quiet, they're, reserved, or maybe they don't find things that they enjoyed before enjoyable anymore. So I feel like, you can even I feel like if you're a parent, especially, or even a really good friend to somebody, like, how that friend acts on a regular basis. And I feel like even if they're trying to tell you that everything's fine, you can kind of pick up on that energy from somebody that you know really well. And so I think, not being afraid to come up to somebody and be like, "Hey, I noticed that you have been, going to your room a lot more. Do you feel like something's going on? Do you maybe want to do something different? Go out, maybe get dressed up and go to dinner for no reason, or cook for no reason,
Yeah.
Because that communication can be loud and clear sometimes too, you know.
If you
Mhm.
see that being like, when I do that too sometimes, and when I do
Yeah.
it, it's usually because I'm avoiding the rest of the world because I don't feel like talking to anyone because I'm upset or I'm angry or I'm sad or
Right.
like I don't know if that's why you're doing it, but that's why I do those same things that you're doing now.
Yeah.
Right. I also heard this really fun technique, and I think it's more utilized with younger children. But just to see, like, if you are a parent and you're like, you think maybe they're having a tougher time making friends, or they're just on the spectrum in general, and you know that there's, stigma with it. So you just want to make sure. You sort of like, it's a little tricky because you never want to like have them cued in that you're cross-examining them or anything like that for them to be like, oh
Yeah.
no, it's fine. So you kind of sit them down at like bedtime and you start this really imaginative story. And you're like, okay, imagine you're an astronaut and you're on a mission and you have them chime in. So you're like, what's your mission? And they tell you. And you're like, okay, great. And then which planet are you going to go to? They chime in. Okay, great. So you need someone, you have to save your school or you have to save, this is the mission, whatever. Who would you bring? And maybe like have a certain amount of people that they might need to bring and just be mindful of like, do they say anybody that you haven't met yet? Like, is there a friend at school? Is there anybody? Of course, you don't want to like react in the moment, because it's supposed to be like a fun, simple story. But maybe just to find a window into their world a little bit with less
That is
pressure.
so cool. I love that.
Yeah.
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 Like Despicable Me when he reacts. Like, who are you texting, Avery? No, it doesn't matter. Unless it's a boy and then it matters. And he like
Yeah.
freaks out. Be like, wait,
Right?
who is that person on this trip? How come I didn't make it? No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, absolutely. Those were both that's some really great research that both of y'all did. Thank you guys so much for doing that and taking the time to look into that because I think it is an important topic for us to hit on. I think that our organization is very much focused on quality of life and increasing that. So I think it does matter to kindness across abilities. And of course, it matters to the group of people we're serving. Y'all did awesome. Look at these smarty pants. Smarty pants,
Thank
girl.
you. Thank you. That's the great part too, is like autism is big and vast and mysterious and so unique. And it's like the more research we can do, I love it because I feel like it helps me just be a better human being. When you learn about all the experiences a human being can possibly go through, it gives us gratitude, but it also gives us perspective.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Thinking about it in a different way. I always feel like reading does that, where it like opens up, like I never thought about it that way. It gives someone else's perspective. It really helps take away your bias and things like that. It's very cool.
yeah.
But yeah, I do think this was well, we missed it, but it would be a perfect month for us to focus on because I do, like you said, a quality of life, feeling a sense of community, being included. I think that all would help a lot.
And to be fair, we spent September learning
That's
about
true.
it. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
Gina came to us with the idea too. Like, she's out there on the social media, like seeing people responding in this way. It's like, okay, we gotta
Yeah.
take the
Yeah.
month and use it properly. So
Exactly. Yeah. And we just flip-flopped them because like I think October is like book month or reading month.
okay,
So we like combine them and it's like we were reading and doing suicide. So we're just gonna extend it to the end of October.
Absolutely.
perfect. I have a question though. Who's making these months? Like,
I don't
how
know.
do you
And I
know?
feel like there's multiple things on each month,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
There
So maybe we'll just name one for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's nonprofit, donate to your local kindness across ability incorporated
Yeah.
month.
October's for kindness in all
Yeah.
ways. Always.
Just January
Kidding
through
around.
December.
Well, yes. We want to thank you guys for listening to us, being a part of our communication. Sorry, it's a party in my house.
right. Okay. I had to change
Okay.
rooms like 3 times, so no worries.
All right. Thanks again, you guys. We love you, and just spread as much kindness as you possibly can, because you never know what someone's truly going through.
So true.
Bye.